Hi, Year 11. I hope you had a nice, peaceful, restful Christmas and that everybody is keeping well. I'm sure you've heard the news that the exams are obviously cancelled in January. So we're just going to continue with the course for now and throughout the month of January. Where I got to before the Christmas holidays was histograms and drawing a histogram. Now, I actually did the example before Christmas, but we actually didn't answer any questions. So what I'm going to do now is just recap the example. So everybody, whether you were doing your learning online or whether you were in class, you should already have this example in your notebook. So I'm just going to recap the example and then I'm going to set a few questions to do for homework. So first of all, a histogram. A histogram is used to illustrate data that's in groups. So you can clearly see here, the data is the number of days it took to process different passports. For example, there were 30 people whose passports took between 0 and 10 days to process and so on. So that's the meaning of the table. And the data, as I say, is in groups. Now, each group within a histogram is represented by a rectangular bar. So this group, third group, and the fourth group, they're all represented by rectangular bars. Now, in order to draw the rectangular bar for each group, we need the width, and the width is called the class width. So the class width gives you the width of each bar, and we also need the height of each bar, and the height of each bar is actually called the frequency density. Okay, let's start with the class width. To get the class width for each group, we're looking for the difference between the end values of each group. So in other words, the bigger end value minus the smaller end value. So 10 minus 0 is going to give us just 10. Class width for the second group is 15 minus 10, which is just going to give us 5. Class width for the third group is going to be 20 subtract 15. And the class width for the final group is going to be 35 minus 20, which is going to give us 15. So what we've done is we've worked out the width of each rectangle, which represents each of these groups. Now we've got to get the height of each rectangle that represents each of these groups. And we use a little formula. The height is called the frequency density, and the frequency density is equal to the frequency divided by the class width. And again, you have to learn that formula. Frequency divided by class width. So let's go to the first group. We take its frequency, we divide it by the class width. So 30 divided by 10 is just going to give us 3. We do exactly the same for the second group. 45 divided by 5 is going to give us 9. The third group, 23 divided by 5. Well, 5 goes into 23 4 times. And we're left with a remainder of 3/5. 3/5 is 0.6, so that's going to give us 4.6. And then finally our final group, frequency 12 divided by class width 15. So that's 12 divided by 15. Well, if you think about it, 12 over 15, you could cancel that down. 3 goes into both, goes into 12 4 times, goes into 15 5 times. So we're left with 4/5, which is just 0.8. So what we've actually done so far is we've worked out the width and we've worked out the height for each rectangle which represents each group. Now, we've got to actually then draw the histogram. First up, the horizontal axis is the data axis, and it always starts at the smallest value in the first group, which is 0. And it's going to go up to the largest value in the final group. So our horizontal axis is going to go from 0 to 35. So we've got 0. And then I'm going to choose a sensible scale. I'm going to go up. Every 2 squares is worth 5. So there's 5. Another 2 squares, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and then 35. So that's our horizontal axis, and that is the data axis. So label it the number of days. It's important you label it. You lose marks in the exam if you don't do that. So number of days, D. Now the vertical axis, because the height of the bars is the frequency density, the vertical axis is called the frequency density. Now, the frequency density, just like the cumulative frequency, when you were drawing a cumulative frequency curve, it always starts at 0. The vertical axis must always start at 0. The horizontal axis doesn't have to start at 0. It just starts at whatever the smallest value of the first group is. If the first group had the smallest value of, say, 10, then you would start the horizontal axis at 10. But the vertical axis always starts at 0. And you look down your frequency densities, you look for what the largest frequency density is, it's 9. So our vertical axis is going to go from 0 to 9. So again, I'm just going to let 1 square be worth 1 unit. So there's 2. Another 2 squares up is 4. Another 2 squares up is 6. Another 2 squares up is 8. And then another 2 squares up is going to give us 10. So that's sensible. Okay, sensible axes. So the final thing to do now is to rule the bars for each group. So if we take a look at the first group starts at 0 and goes to 10. So in other words, it's 10 wide. So that's the width of the first group, the first bar. And the height of the first bar is 3. So what I'm going to do is start at 0, 10 wide, and 3 up. And that's going to be bar number 1, hopefully. Okay, so there's our first bar. Okay, the next bar starts at 10. Gone too far. Okay, the next bar, it starts at 10 and it goes to 15. So its width is 5 and it's 9 high. So if we take a look at the next bar, it starts at 10, goes to 15, and it's 9 high. So again, taking my ruler in one hand, I'm going to draw the bar that represents the second group. Okay, so there's our second group. So 5 wide, starts at 10, goes to 15, 5 wide, and then 9 high. So the third group then starts at 15 and goes to 20. So there's 15, goes to 20. So it's only 5 wide, which makes sense from the table, 5 wide. And it's 4.6 high. So again, 4.6, there's 5, so 4.6 is going to be just about there. And then I'm going to rule a vertical line up. As high as 4.6. Then a horizontal line across. Okay, and there's our third bar, the bar that represents the third group. Okay, the last group. So it starts at 20 and goes to 35. So it's 15 wide. And then it goes as high as 0.8. So 15 wide and as high as 0.8. Well, the first square up is just 1, so 0.8 is just ever so slightly beneath that. So I'm going to rule the final bar. And there's the bar that represents the last group. So that's our completed histogram. You'll notice that all the bars are not necessarily the same width. They vary in width and height. But the key point of all is that the area of each bar gives you the frequency of the group that it represents. So if you take a look at the first bar here, this first bar represents the first group. If we calculated the area of the first bar, it's a rectangle, so area is length times breadth. The length would be 10. The breadth here would be 3. So you'd be multiplying 10 by 3 and that would give you 30. Now, 30 is the frequency of the first group. So that's the point I'm making. The area of each bar should give you the frequency of the group that it represents. Okay.